am Gian Smith, the Festival Director for the Black Film Festival of New Orleans, and I am pleased to welcome Dr. Thomas LaVeist, creator of this film, The Skin I'm In. Let's give a round of applause to Dr. Thomas LaVeist.
Thank you. Hello, yes, okay.
Okay, so I have some questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. I'd like to actually start with the filmmaking. First of all, number one, congratulations. Always tell filmmakers congratulations on completing a project, because I know that's a big undertaking, especially for someone who does not consider themselves a filmmaker. So can I ask first, what prompted you to choose film as your medium of expression?
Yeah, so the story behind that is, I was out at dinner with a friend of mine, and first, no offense to the academics in the room, but my friends tend not to be academics, sorry. And so we were out at dinner. This is a friend of mine who's in the music industry. We were out at dinner, and we generally don't talk about work. We would talk about, football and women or whatever, but we generally don't talk about our work too much. But this night, he just kept asking me questions. He said, I know you're a professor, but what does that mean? What do you do? And I have little dodges that I use when people start asking me those questions, and I usually give them a quick answer and try to change the topic, get back to football or whatever. And I used up he kept asking, and so I was totally out of my dodges. And he said, no, but really, what do you do? And then I said, okay, he really wants to know. I got to give him something. So I said, all right, I'm writing a book. And he said, oh, okay, that's interesting, a book. What is it about? I said, well, we've been doing all this research over the last 30, 40 years around why racial disparities in health exist. And we got some answers, but it's all locked away in the library. And if you don't have access to that library and know how to read those articles, you won't know. There's a lot of people in communities who could benefit from that knowledge. And I want to get that knowledge out of the library and into the hands of people who can make a difference. So I'm writing a book. It's not an academic book. It's to the general public. And I don't care if the university library never buys it. I want the general public, community activists, people who are working in communities to get this information. And he looked at me and said, well, that's cool, but that's not a book. You need to make a film. And I said, well, I don't know how to make a film. I don't know how to write a book, so I'm going to write a book. But that stuck with me, right? And so the next morning, I'm meeting with the development team, the fundraising team at the university I was at that time, which was Johns Hopkins. And they were prepping me to go up to New York to meet with a donor, to help raise money for the university. And so she says, well, what are you working on? You got anything that you think this donor might be interested in? And I said, I'm going to make a documentary film. Now, this idea was about 8 hours in my head. I had I didn't even know what the first thing to do was. I know how to watch a film, but, but I just decided, he was right. I'm going to make this film. And she said, oh, really? Well, that same night you're there's a reception in New York for people from Johns Hopkins in the film industry. And I said, there are people from Johns Hopkins in the film industry?
You told me something.
Yeah, and she said, well, we had that writing program, and we had this venerable writing program, and a lot of them are filmmakers. I said, oh, okay, cool. So I show up at this reception, and you have the name tag, which, walking around at this reception. And of course, I don't know anybody in there. And I'm just trying to figure out, I got to work the room. And people would walk up to me and they'd look at my name and they'd say, oh, so Thomas, what's your next project? As if they'd seen my last project, right? And I was like, oh, okay, so this is how you do it. So I just started walking up to people. So Sally, what's your next project? So Joe, what's your next project? And I made all these friends who actually do know how to make movies. And I talked to them about what I wanted to do. And so what you see on that screen is, they didn't let me touch any equipment. I'm not running around with a camcorder doing that. And all of the video work was done by people who actually know what they're doing. And that was how it all happened.
I saw Alejandro's name a lot. It looked like he did. I saw your name in a couple of spots too. Sound, music, I think you.
Well, I am a musician, so I actually do know what I'm doing there. So I did the music for the film.
Okay, and how did you meet your cinematographer / editor?
Well, interestingly, he was already working for me. At the time, I was a director of a research center at Johns Hopkins, and he was He did like video for us and did a lot of filmmaking. He did a lot of, all our communications. So I actually knew him already. And he really influenced me a lot and convinced me that film is a way to do it and that he would be able to help. And he played a huge role in getting, other professionals to help us to put it all together.
Mm-hmm. And usually I'll ask a filmmaker about what's next for them, but from the beginning of this, I could tell what was next, episode 2. So what's the likelihood that this becomes a complete docuseries? How far are we into that process?
Well, it depends how much I can raise. And so we raised the money to make this episode. I decided, well, we're going to just focus on this one, get it out there. We have 5 more episodes that are planned, and if we can raise the money, we'll do that. And if otherwise, we'll put this one film out, and I do have another project after that. Also.
Okay,
So
okay. You a filmmaker? No, that's look. Welcome.
I guess so.
And again, really, really great job on the film. Such a great collection of brilliant scholars who delivered some really poignant analogies that really resonated with me. Just hearing every day a Southwest Airlines plane crashes and everybody on board dies day after day after day. Like that really, kind of sent the message home about how our community is being affected in these ways. These relationships that you got for the film, you had these already. Like, how did you meet some of the people that you decided to?
These were some of my friends, professional friends from all over the years that I worked with. Like David Williams, who made that quote. He and I were schoolmates at school, and Alvin Poussaint is just somebody I like to. Whenever I'm in Boston, I just like to pop in on him because he's always got something interesting to say. And just people that I've known professionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to talk about some of the things that we talked about in the film. Some of the racial issues, things that I've kind of been picking up on as I get older, but they really become clear. Like watching this film, stress, the effects of stress on people, and I feel like that's probably something that we don't really intuitively think about as like a direct path to some of these poor outcomes. Was there anything for you that you found out during the making of this film that was a surprise? Any information, any knowledge that came to you?
That's an interesting question. It was a lot of things that came to me that I didn't expect. But, I guess the overall project was somewhat of a surprise because, it didn't occur to me, and I've been doing this kind of work, this academic work around these topics for a long time. And it never occurred to me to even think about the neighborhood that I grew up in. And it was until I saw that article in the newspaper, and like, wow, of course, Brownsville is going to be a community that's under significant challenge, and it was not surprising that it would have the lowest life expectancy in New York. Mm-hmm. But it was a little surprising when I read the article at first because I just hadn't thought about that. And it's interesting how somebody whose career has really been about this very topic, it had never even occurred to me that my own neighborhood would be, a neighborhood that's so challenged. And frankly, it was probably growing up in that neighborhood that led me to be doing this work in the first place,
Yeah, and first of all, thank you for sharing your neighborhood with us. I definitely love being able to connect with other people and their cultures and their communities. So we appreciate you opening up to what seems like a really wonderful place with prideful people.
Let me just say one thing about that. I hadn't lived there in a long time. And I had no idea how they would respond to me coming back. Mm. But as you can see, people would I was embraced like, long lost relative who had been gone, who just came back home to visit. They let me into their homes. Some of those scenes are shot. There's one scene where, Tay Mack is talking about the police and what happened when he went to the store for his grandmother. We're on the roof of one of the housing projects, at night. They just embraced me, brought me into their homes, opened up their homes. And it was really, I think impressive. The other thing is just how much brilliance there is. There is a difference between intelligence and education. The people in Brownsville are not necessarily the best educated people, but they are as brilliant and intelligent as any student at this university and anyone else that I've met anywhere else. And if you listen to the two young men that we featured, I think that comes through. They are absolutely aware and understand what's happening to their community, what's happening to them. They may not have the fancy vocabulary to express it in different ways, but they clearly get it. And they understand that this is a community that's under a great challenge. So there's a lot of brilliance there that we're wasting in this society.
Yeah, no doubt. I definitely appreciated their application of the knowledge that they had clearly acquired. And I'm wondering how much you were able to relate to them, and was there a motivation to put some of your own personal testimony in there that you had to kind of decide, maybe not to, and let it focus on?
I didn't want to be in front of the camera at all. All right. I didn't want to have, I just, but it was the other filmmakers that really, convinced me that I need to be a part of the story. I need to get in front of the camera. I need to be the narrator. I need to be telling this story in first person. And that just, and they had to work me pretty hard to get me to do that, because it is not my personality to be the one in front of the camera. But they finally convinced me that I needed to. And, I think they were right.
I do agree with them that it was a really good decision to hear you speak directly to these things as a resident of Brownsville, but also obviously as an expert in this field, and as a voice of moderation for, again, so many brilliant scholars who were able to point directly to here are the problems, here are how the problems play out in, everyday lives, and how, lives get cut short because of it. I'm assuming then that because you were the narrator, you also probably did some writing for this and curated, how this story played out and how this information was disseminated too. Can you talk about like that process of how you, decided what you were going to talk about?
I'm sure you could relate to this as a filmmaker. It was, we had to find the story in the film. And that was hard because we started shooting, and the first concept was 90-minute feature-length film. That was the first concept. And then when we started talking to people and we had so many different conversations, it became clear that this story was there's just way too much here to be just one film. It needed to be a series. So we had to rethink the entire thing. And then that is where we decided to break it into topic areas. And, we'd shot a lot in Brownsville already. We shot in some other communities too, but we had shot in there, a lot of that. And then the story just sort of at a certain point, after just watching that footage, and for those of you that may not be filmmakers, for a 90-minute film, you shoot about 900 hours of footage. I mean, it's crazy, the amount of footage that never gets into the film. And you've got to kind of find that story. And when we finally figured out what the story was, then it just came down to writing the narration. And I did the writing, but it was a matter of once we were able to figure out, well, what was the story? What do we have here? And how can we tell this story in a way that people can kind of follow it? I'll just stop. I feel like I'm rambling now.
No, not at all. How long did it take to accumulate everything, like that 900 hours? Do you, from like beginning to, I guess, whenever you put that final edit together?
Well, we still don't have the final edit. The final edit will be this summer, and the final version of the film will be released in December. So it'll be out this year. I was looking at my computer, the first files that I created on my computer about this project, I'm embarrassed to say, was 2013.
Oh, wow. Oh, man, that's great.
So that's when we first, that's good.
That is, well, I mean, that's the fortitude to like continue to follow through to completion. Like, that's wonderful. Yeah. But the length of time, I mean, it takes how long it takes, right? And especially like if you're not the filmmaker who's in charge of creating this vehicle to, not just be entertaining and engaging, but also deliver so much necessary information. Like, yeah, naturally it's just going to take time, but like you didn't give up on that process. Like you followed through for 11 years, or going into its 12th year to like, that's incredible. So yeah, congratulations on that alone.
I feel a lot better about that now. Thank you for saying that.
Look, and then to get to episode 2, like it'll be way less than that.
Yeah.
Like might just be like 5.
Well, there's no doubt about that because we started. I knew absolutely nothing about filmmaking. Still don't claim to be like an expert, but I know a hell of a lot more about filmmaking now, and I think we could do it a lot faster.
I think I want to open it up to the audience. I have a couple more questions, but I'd love if anybody else has any questions to jump in right now. Hello. Let's start with my friend back here, and I'm going to come to you second. Wait, we got a mic coming to you, too.
We have a 25-year health disparity here in Orleans Parish. So this is just, the whole thing has been great. So I just want to be able to say that looking at all this has been great. But on the release, because it's so great to see this developed, how do we get this out? Because there was a component in there that caught me that looked at how oppression has gotten people where they are just paralyzed. And we've looked at centuries of that happening, because that was one of the things that was brought up by someone that talked about that internalizing and how the oppression and how overwhelming it is. And for us to be entering another phase where we're being overwhelmed with messages that are horrific as we go through this new time, it's just, how will you be getting that out? And how can it be highlighted again about this internalizing of the oppression and the pain, so that what can we do not to be paralyzed?
Yeah, it's interesting that you would bring that up because, the final version, we've got a couple of additional scenes that have been added, and that is one of the topics that we've embellished more because it was pretty short here. How we'll get the film out, or how do we get that particular issue out? Yeah, we're going to release it in December. We're holding a summit in Montgomery, Alabama, a health equity summit in Montgomery, Alabama, and we're going to release it at that. But I'm also going to enter it in more film festivals once we get the final version done, we'll be entering in more film festivals and for the fall and the winter, and probably even in the spring of next year. And then we'll see what the distribution plan is going to be. I mean, if an opportunity comes along with a distributor, and I've had some conversations, but nothing that I was willing to agree to at this point. A distribution plan that would not allow us, would cause me to have to give up control is been the issue. And if I can't get a distribution plan, and if I can't raise the money, then we will make a study guide, and we'll put the film on YouTube, and we will make the study guide available for people to download for free and show the film in their classes and get the information out. Because this information, I didn't make this film to win an award. I didn't make this film to make money. I made this film for it to be used. And it's my hope and my vision that it'll be used in high schools, colleges, churches, community organizations, and it'll be out there. So I want to make it as available as possible. So up to and including putting it on YouTube for free, that will work for me too. So we'll see how it works.
And can I ask a follow-up to that before we get to your question? Have you thought about, for the future episodes, maybe going into other neighborhoods? Oh
yeah, so the other stories, the film is not, I mean, this one episode is set in Brownsville, but the other stories are in one is an episode on environmental health issues or environmental justice. And that we shot a lot of that already in Newport News, Virginia, where there's a community pretty much surrounded by environmental hazards, and that episode is going to be about Newport News and New Orleans and what happened here in New Orleans around Pontchartrain Park. So that episode would be there. So each episode is in a different community and approaching a different aspect of health inequities.
Nice.
Yes, I wanted to ask you the naturalness of the actors. I'm assuming these weren't trained actors, but how did you get that where it seemed like they were just talking and very much communicating and conveying the ideas in a way that seemed like they were professional actors?
Well, they weren't acting. They were authentically being themselves. That's what we told people, to be themselves. And that's what we wanted. And so Alejandro Arango found those two young men. And there was a scene where you see that I'm on FaceTime, and he was in the neighborhood. He had found them, and he was so excited. He called me up and said, "I got him. I think we found the people to help us tell this story." And he called me up, and that's what you saw. We're talking, and he was shooting that. But those two guys were just made to order, and two absolutely brilliant young men, neither of whom are well educated, but both of them are brilliant and have a very nuanced and sophisticated understanding of what's happening in their community and why.
I'll jump in and ask another question. If anybody else, I'll look to you for a second. When I think about like strategy, about trying to resolve an issue, then I think the first thing I might think about is, who is my opponent? And clearly the opponents in this are systems that have, again, since, the laws allowed you to district however you wanted people to do to, put us in these positions that have carried forth. Who are the opponents today that you have identified that we can directly speak to, and what are their arguments that if they have any intellectual way to continue to put these systems at odds against us?
Well, you mean the opponents to addressing health equity? I guess that would be, there are people who would prefer to use resources differently, right? They have different priorities, and they realize that addressing health equity will cost, right, money and resources, and they'd rather see those resources to be used on something else. And there are some people who would prefer to ignore that the problem exists. We're under challenge now to even use the word health equity, something that I'm not agreeing to capitulate to. So there are people who simply don't see the importance of it, or who feel that anything we do to address a problem like this would be devoting resources to one group, and that one group doesn't deserve or shouldn't have those resources. So I think it's a matter of will and getting people to understand that the interconnectedness of everyone who lives in this country, on this planet, requires that if we don't raise the boat for everyone, that we'll continue to have suboptimal outcomes for everyone. So I think getting that message across to people is the problem. So when I think about health equity, what does that mean? Health equity to me is ensuring that we have a population healthy enough to have a military that can protect the country. It means having a population of workers that's healthy enough to fuel an economy. It means having a community that's healthy enough to have parents who are able to raise their children. We can go on and on and on. All of that is health equity in my mind, but it's people who don't see it that way, who see that as giving resources to, groups that don't deserve those resources. It's the opponent is a mentality that we have to try to combat.
And then just a question about that and towards resolutions. As an individual, what could I do to combat that? How can I take on this opponent? What would you recommend to just a person who, agrees with you on this problem and wants to take action? What's a good step that we could do?
Well, I think making that point that, if we put resources into improving the conditions in one neighborhood to raise the health status of that neighborhood, that doesn't mean that we're doing harm to other neighborhoods, right? Because there's a spillover. All right, to use some public health terminology, pathogens don't care about your political views. They don't care about your religious views. They don't care about your values. The pathogen is going to go where it's going to go. It's going to do what it does. And the pathogen's sole purpose of existence is to replicate, right? So if you have measles and you're sitting this close to me, I'm at risk of being exposed to measles. It doesn't matter whether I believe in a vaccine or not. The virus doesn't care. The virus sees me as another host, and it's going to come into my body and it's going to impact me. So I think it's getting people to understand these sorts of concepts and
Yeah, dialogue.
That ain't necessarily easy, but that's what we have to do.
Yeah. More questions from the audience? Anybody?
Hi. Hi, Dr. LaVeist. I was wondering about, so you first mentioned that you were filming this in, I believe, 2013? So it's been some years since you filmed.
Well, I said the first file on my computer was opened in 2013, but it doesn't mean we started filming in 2013.
Got it. Okay. But I'm assuming it's been some years since from filming to this release. And it sounds like the other episodes are also already, like you already have the footage for that.
Some of them.
Okay. And so my question is, do you anticipate there being, like, are the issues that you're covering, are they still going to be timely? Are they still going to be relevant? Are the communities still going to be facing these same problems? Are the problems going to be worse? Are they going to be better? Yeah, just what do you think of that?
Yeah. Well, you know, the sad thing is that these issues have been with us for as long as we've had the ability to collect data to document these issues. So I have no reason to believe that environmental justice will not be an issue 10 years from now, 15 years from now. I mean, I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope that we do things now that will make that possible, but I don't see where that's happening. And, you know, we haven't actually shot the episodes. We have plans for what we think they will be, but we'll certainly always be, if we do raise the money, we'll certainly be looking at it, at what's happening in the world and making adjustments.
I like that system. If anybody else has a question, you can tap in. I'll jump in real quick again, and I want to ask, did you write the book?
Oh, no, you must have talked to my editor. All right. Well, my book editor is on me. You know, I have a contract. I do have a contract for the book, but the problem is writing when I signed that contract, I was a professor. And then shortly after signing that contract, I became a department chair. And then after 2 years as a department chair, I became a dean. And being an administrator in higher education is not conducive to writing books. And that's been the problem. And
especially not when you're making movies.
That's not lost on my editor either, who I happened to run into at a conference. Didn't expect to see him, and yeah, because I've been dodging him. But you know, we're gonna get this book done. I'm gonna get it done.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, so my question is, like, I know this is happening in poor communities and Black people and across the world, and people that are privileged usually do not go through these disparities, but we went through a pandemic which caused this to happen to everybody. People didn't have access to healthcare, people didn't have screenings, people didn't have access to chemotherapies, for example, and their conditions got worse. Sorry, I get nervous when I do public speaking. So after all these people, like when a pandemic happened or a hurricane or a natural disaster, everybody experiences these issues, right? Have you seen any shift in people from privileged communities getting more involved? You know, when something happens to you, you're like, oh, this is so unfair. Maybe you educate yourself and you realize, wait, this happened to me now because of this event, but this has been happening to people that don't have access to money or all of these resources that I usually have. So for me, I will be like, oh, let me get more involved in trying to change this, you know, on a regular basis.
Yeah. You know, I find that people who are more privileged, you know, really fall into different camps. I wouldn't make a generalized statement. I mean, some people who are more privileged have been very interested and have put their own resources behind supporting it. I mean, I was able to raise money to do this much of the film. Have some confidence that I can raise more. So there are people out there who have resources, who do care, and they have been supportive. There are others who are more, you know, who maybe don't see the importance of addressing these issues. You know, and that's also, we see that right now in government. You know, we have the government that's pulling back from some of the infrastructure that's been created over the last few decades to try to address this problem. So you have that as well. And but I find that most people are just sort of are neither looking to be the advocate or the impediment. They're just not something that they focus on. And there are a lot of people who I think just don't really get it, just don't really understand the problem. And I do find that, especially among African Americans, especially highly educated African Americans, who often think that this is really a problem of poor people. And they are 100% wrong about that, because even among highly educated and affluent African Americans, you still have a disparity in health between white people with similar levels of education and income. But we sort of assume that this is all about poverty. It's not at all the case.
No, I'm from Puerto Rico, so we're from an island, and in Puerto Rico, it doesn't matter how rich or poor you are. Like, the resources that you have are limited, and sometimes you have to wait 5 months to get like a doctor's appointment or something. So when you come from an island, that is a reality for literally everyone there. You know, you can have connections and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's still a reality for everyone. But maybe you don't, like, in a state like this, you could like have different opportunities to go around it. So I do get that it is not something like economical.
Well, there are inequalities in Puerto Rico as well. And, there are those who can get on a plane and fly to New York and get health care there, and those that can't, right? And so there are inequities, and different people have different resources and, take advantage of those. If you live in the city versus not living in the city, that makes a difference. I mean, there are differences. And as I travel the world, I see these inequities all over the planet. In fact, I've been in many different countries, and I've seen a lot of poverty, and I've seen a lot of affluence as well. And I see these inequities, and I haven't been to a country yet where I haven't seen, pretty glaring inequities.
I think we had another question from a friend up here. I wanted to ask, you said earlier in this conversation, it's not about money, it's not about awards, not about fame, it's about getting this message out. And I wonder, have you thought about what would be a tangible marker for you of success? Like, I don't know if in our lifetime we would see that gap close from 74 to 85, but what would feel like a success for you as a result of this work?
Well, I feel like a success for me that I point at, and that I already do claim, is I look at the number of people that are doing this work now versus when I first started doing this work. And when I learned that these disparities existed, it was like the mid 80s, early 80s is when I really started, cluing into this issue, and decided that I was going to, direct my career to that topic. And when we started doing that work, we didn't even have the vocabulary we have to describe the problem. We wouldn't, figure out how to even talk about it, at that stage. But when you look at what we have now, where we are now, we didn't have textbooks to teach about this in class. We now have that. We didn't have, agencies that fund these topics. I see an infrastructure that's grown up, and mostly what gives me the most pleasure is to see the number of scholars that have come behind, junior researchers, people, and even students that are interested in this topic. That I know that there are generations coming up behind me that's going to stand on our shoulders and take this to another level. And I already see a lot of people doing that kind of work. So that is what keeps me encouraged.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was two of the women scholars in particular who they seem to be speaking to the same 3 points of racism: the internalized, personal, and the internal. Personal, like, acted on,
personally
and
mediated,
personally
and internalized
mediated.
racism. So Kamara Jones and Deborah Holden, who both of them are former students of mine, and both have gone on to become leaders in health equity. Kamara Jones was the president of the American Public Health Association. Deborah Holden was the former dean of NYU School of Public Health. That's what I look at, and I say, yeah, we're succeeding. It's going to take time, and it's not likely that we'll get to a point of equity in my lifetime, but I see the trajectory, and I see the leaders that are developing, that are evolving, and that are doing this work, and I'm feeling good about that. We're on a good path.
Yeah, my question was, is this film, are you just hoping to kind of say what the problem is, and then maybe at some point the ending might have some possible solutions, or where do you see the resolution of this issue? How do you see that resolution happening and being filmed to educate, or what is the purpose?
Yeah, so like I said, we're gonna do the book ends with a chapter on this very issue, talking about speaking to different communities, what different sectors. So what the private sector can do, what government can do, what philanthropy can do, what the church can do, what individuals can do. So that's the book ends like that. That's not in the film, but I do plan to build a study guide that you can use, and hopefully people will use it in educational settings, not just schools, but community organizations, churches, things like that, where we'll get more into what we know has worked. But there was something here. We talked about CPR. There's one thing, and is who here has been trained in CPR? Okay, now not every hand went up, right? And that's unacceptable, right? Because CPR is very inexpensive, very easy to learn, and everyone should know at least basic CPR, right? There's one thing that we can do.
If there's no more questions from the audience, I just have a couple. Oh, would you? Okay, no. I just have a couple more before we wrap up. You said you have another project in the works. Is that also health oriented? And are you allowed to talk about it at this time?
Oh, sure, I can talk about it. It's a excellent. This one is but I got to finish this first. So that's why it's kind of I try to keep it in the back burner. So I guess it was like right around 2013 or 14. Actually, there was the African Union had created a new section for the African diaspora. The way the African Union is set up, it's in regions of Africa, but there wasn't one for diaspora, so they created one for the diaspora, right? And they had a conference in Honduras where it was people mostly from the Western Hemisphere, different countries. So I was part of the U.S. delegation, and we went down there, and I got to spend a little time away from the conference with the Garifuna community in Honduras. And this is just a fascinating community with a fascinating history. If their story is, I don't have time to get into the whole story, but basically part of their story is that they escaped from slavery by taking over a slave ship. And the slave ship basically landed they were trying to go east, back towards Africa, but they actually wound up in Honduras, and it ran aground in Honduras. And so I went to the location where that happened and met the people in the community, which actually are still living at that same location where that slave ship landed, and got to meet them. We shot a lot of footage about them and did some interviews there. And there's a huge Garifuna community in New York and in New Orleans. And
my grandparents are from Honduras. My grandmother is
really
Griffin.
Okay. So and then the African American Museum, so the Smithsonian up in Washington, are kind of on us about when are you going to get that Garifuna documentary done. And that one, I really want to get that one done too, but I got to do one thing at a time, and I got to run this school. So,
Yeah. I got one more question, and then I think we can wrap up, and you'll hang around in the lobby if anybody wants to come.
I live here. I live here.
Okay, good. What can we do to help amplify this film? What do we, how do we connect with you, connect with it, stay connected, and give this film the life it deserves?
Well, I wish I was prepared to answer that question. I'm looking at my communications expert back there. He was like, how do I answer that question? Well, I mean, I may need you to chime in, but one thing we can do is we can certainly follow us in social media. help build our social media presence. We're putting together a lot of clips from the film. We're trying to amplify it that way. When we're going to show it, we're going to release it at the summit in Montgomery in December. Do we have the date for that? Anybody?
December 3rd through 5th.
All right, December.
Montgomery,
So,
Alabama.
and it'll be in Montgomery, but we're also going to stream it. So, you'll be able to see it. So we're trying to build a social media presence around it so that people know it's coming and people will be expecting it. And hopefully we can have a big audience online for it. And then, of course, the film is, unless something happens, a distribution opportunity comes up, the film is going to live online. That's kind of where my head is at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas LaVeist. I appreciate you for joining us for this film, for your work and scholarship, man. Thank you, man.
Yeah, absolutely.